A quick video today to talk about the inflationary crisis that's looming, and things have got a lot worse, obviously, with these events in the Ukraine, let's call them, that's caused natural gas prices and oil prices to soar, and that will lead to more inflation. But that's not the real cause of the inflation that we're experiencing. The real cause is all the money printing that went on during the 2 year lockdowns and the destruction of large numbers of businesses due to lockdowns. Anyway, what I'm going to talk about now is what you can do to prepare yourself for this kind of inflationary depression that's coming our way. So the first thing is to look very carefully at your debts. Inflation is going to increase the cost of living. So even if interest rates don't rise, you're going to find it harder to make your interest payments on your debts. In all probability, though, interest rates will rise. With a lot of people that I respect, Jim Rogers and stuff, they're expecting inflation to hit double digits soon. So the central banks are just going to have to increase interest rates. So what sort of things can you do? Well, look at your own. If you've got a house with a big mortgage on it, you're going to struggle to repay that mortgage, even if you've got a fixed rate for a while. So my advice would be those with big mortgages, look to put your house on the market now, sell it, and then see if you can buy somewhere smaller without a mortgage. Because, this is in their plans, isn't it? The World Economic Forum, as Klaus Schwab says, you'll own nothing and be happy. So this is what I'm expecting is a big round of repossessions. People won't be able to afford their mortgages because of the combination of a rise in the cost of living. It's just going to be a lot harder for people to make their mortgage repayments. And so what I'm advising people to do is if you've got big mortgage debts, downsize, put it up for sale, take the cash, and then pay off the mortgage, and then see if you can buy somewhere else with the cash that you've got left without the need for a mortgage. Obviously, the same issue doesn't really apply with renters. I expect rents to go up, but it probably be a more moderate rate of inflation than you might see on essentials like bread and petrol and stuff. Okay, so that's the first thing. So downsize. The other one would be to look to cut your expenditure. So the car that you've got, the lease car, end the lease as soon as possible and go and buy something for cash now. Other things that you could look at is how long is your commute to work? Think about maybe buying a bike or something if you live in somewhere where you're not going to get knocked off your bike because there's too much traffic. What else would I suggest to combat inflation? So also I would suggest looking at all of the debts that you've got that are secured and pay those off as fast as possible. The people that are going to have the best chance of surviving are going to be the ones that are debt free. Because those debts are just, because I keep on saying, those debts are just going to be harder and harder and harder to service. The other thing that I would say is during a time of rapidly rising prices, there's likely to be strain on the banking system. At the moment, there's no incentive whatsoever to put your money in a bank. Also, the events in Canada show that governments have got this nasty habit now of not respecting private property rights anymore. So, I would say is keep a bit of cash, but keep it outside of the banking system. Obviously, the big advice would be to, if you do have cash, if you're one of these kind of weirdos that you don't have you don't have any debt and you have assets instead. I'm on the one hand, I could say, well, shares, theoretically, they should go up. They've always been a good inflationary hedge. But the thing that you've also got to bear in mind is that many companies will go bust and shares in a bust company go to zero. So you need to be aware of that. People that used to, anything that's based on discretionary spending. So, for example, Costa Coffee, pubs, unfortunately, cinema chains, theme parks, Merlin Group, they're toast because they rely on discretionary spending. And when the inflation's already hitting, people's gas bill has been like doubling. So people won't have any money left to go to theme parks or to go and buy, £5 coffees every day. So those businesses are likely to go bust. Their shares are likely to go to zero. So if you've got a share portfolio, not many people do, but think carefully about what you're invested in, and obviously, buy shares in companies that produce things that are essential. So food and energy would be the two ones that jump out there. Obviously, the other thing to do is to invest in things that can't be printed. I'm going backtracking a little bit back to shares. Obviously, I don't really trust the financial system. It's not beyond the realms of possibilities that your access to your First Direct share dealing account can just get turned off or suspended. So that brings me on to the big one, really, which you can probably guess, which is investing in things, the oldest forms of money that act as superb stores of value that can be kept outside of the banking system. So I'm not actually going to mention what those two metals are, but they've been used as money for thousands of years, and I suspect in the future they'll be used again as money. I'm not a massive fan of Bitcoin because I always wonder, well, what happens if the power goes off again? You could be deprived from access to your wealth. The only other thing that I would say is that if you're a Brit, in particular, Britain's very, very dependent on natural gas to heat houses. So if you haven't bought a wood burner yet, you need to, really, really quickly, to make sure that you can heat your home economically. Other sort of advice I would give is that, particularly with people who rent, who can move quite quickly, or people who are looking to downsize from big mortgages, is look to move out of the cities, because I think the cities are going to, I don't like saying this, but it's not where I would want to be. And also, when you're thinking about locating close to where food's grown, countryside. That's where I would be, and investing in things that could be useful for barter. So things like even just bottles of wine, tins of beer. Those are going to be a much better store of value than a £5 note or €10 note. So those are the things basically that I would be doing at the moment to try to prepare for this inflation that's coming. And just mentally prepare for it. Things are likely to get very, very tough. And, my feeling is whatever's going on in the Ukraine, I don't really care, but I know what it's going to lead to, which is an inflationary collapse that's going to be used as an excuse to usher in central bank digital currencies. So, yeah, in summary then, pay off debts. If you've got any cash left over, invest in things that A, can't be printed, and B, are not dependent on the financial system, because, as I said, governments have got a habit now of stealing assets directly from banks. That's what happened in Canada. People that committed the heinous crime of demonstrating against their government. The government actually contacted private banks and froze their bank accounts. So the same could easily happen. All sorts of emergency powers could be used in a hyperinflation, and you just don't want to be exposed to that sort of risk. I guess an economist would call that a counterparty risk. You don't want to invest in assets that have counterparties. You want to invest in assets that you and you alone own, that are under your possession, under your lock and key. So, and then the other one would be to get close to God, but I'll talk about that another day. Okay, God bless.